Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're happy to be here again with another Compliance Corner video, and this one for February. And this will, of course, be the last one of the winter months. So happy to be moving into spring when we'll see you again next time in March. But yet here today, we have some new items to update you on since last month. And as within previous videos, these are various hot topics that have arisen since last time, and make sure you check the links in the description below for those items that we have marked on the slides with an asterisk. And we'll get started by looking into a summary of what we're going to cover here today. So what we have is a quick little summary of today's topics. You'll see we have the COVID-19 national emergency has been extended, Treasury's proposal regarding negotiation of Treasury checks, some agency guidance on the lower HMDA reporting threshold for closed-end mortgage loans, which we've of course covered in the past, but the agencies have now acknowledged and issued some guidance on. We also have some quick agency supervisory manual updates. We always like to include those for you when those are updated. FRB's latest Consumer Compliance Outlook publication, their regular publication that goes out. We'll talk about some of the updates that are included in there. Homeland Security also issued some insights and an investigation awareness campaign for digital romance scams we'll talk about a little bit. And then lastly, we'll finish off with several of CFPB's releases that CFPB has put out recently. So let's get started with our first topic here. Our first item, and you may have already seen, was that the COVID-19 national emergency has been extended. This is a continuation, of course, of the national emergency that was declared. President Biden made a declaration back in March of 2020. We, of course, all remember, in response to the pandemic. The order was since set to expire on March 1st this year. And the intention does appear to transition out of the national emergency, but that will be after the extension here. The newly extended date is on May 11th. So we'll be looking forward to see if we do wrap up with the national emergency on that date. And of course, looking at this, we're of course reminded that we've been dealing with the pandemic here now for quite some time. And what that's meant for us has been adjusted policies and procedures. It's, again, been a while, and we've become familiar with that and familiar with the new territory and everything that consumers have been dealing with and how to adjust. But that said, now that we are looking to transition away from the national emergency, it's a good reminder to look at those policies and procedures, look at what has been adapted in your areas, what has changed for your consumers, what has changed locally, those lines of businesses, and considering maybe you've had something conditioned upon the emergency declaration, or again, just a good opportunity to evaluate going forward what that's going to mean, what might be appropriate to remain in place or otherwise adjust, and maybe those aspects that you're adopting permanently or those that are going to be set to expire for your own operation and what might be appropriate. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Heather to continue on with some of our other topics.
Super. Thank you, Scott. And as we had mentioned in our original title page, the next topic we're going to cover is that of new guidance issued by each of the agencies. So the OCC, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve have all issued guidance for our banks about how they're going to look at the HMDA reporting requirements now that the CFPB's court case was finalized the way that it was, where it lowered the HMDA reporting threshold for the closed-end mortgage loans. We're now down to the 25 closed-end mortgage loans in the last two preceding years for reporting purposes. So luckily, all of the agencies have said that they are going to be prospective in looking. So each of the agencies stated that they are aware that those that are affected by this change need some time to put some policies in place and some training, some tracking, that they understand that there's going to be a little bit of a ramp up period, so to speak, because it did happen quite quickly. And so each of those guidances are in fact included, as Scott had mentioned, with the asterisk links below, and read those as they relate to each of your own institution, and then you can plan going forward for how to implement and what they're going to be looking for when they come in for examination. So it's certainly happy news, if you can call regulation happy news, but at least it is prospective. So that's very helpful. So on the next topic, then, we wanted to also make sure that you were aware of a proposal that the Treasury is putting forth. So the proposal was issued in the Federal Register here just earlier this month, and the comments are going to be due in April. So if you have particular comments that you want Scott and I to include in our comment letter on your behalf, please let us know, and we'd be happy to consider that in our comments. But what the Treasury is wanting to do is they're trying to create a process where we as banks negotiating Treasury checks, we have a procedure in place that we can use to verify that the check is legitimate and it has not otherwise been paid. So it's meant to stop fraud, which I think for us that are on the front line, this is a helpful tool. But there are a couple things to take into consideration from an operational standpoint. So what the Treasury has proposed here very briefly is that they want the banks to use their check verification system, similar to what we did when we had the economic payment checks that were out there. But they want to broaden that system and use that system to, again, make sure that the check is legitimate. Now, right now, that system has a lag period, as you may recall. It has a 1-day lag period. And the Treasury is making its efforts to update the system so that it would be live time, so that we can rely on it being same-day verification, which is a good thing if they're wanting us to use this particular process to first verify the check. So balancing that interest of wanting to make sure that we're dealing with legitimate checks, our question to you would be, operationally, how will this work for you? Is this going to be something that your teller line would be able to implement on a general reasonable basis? One of the things that Scott and I have identified with respect to the proposal, which is problematic, is our remote deposit capture. That how are we going to know when our customer is making a deposit via that vehicle, and we're not going to have the opportunity to verify that Treasury check. So that's on our short list of things to ask the Treasury about for clarification. But certainly, again, if there are any operational issues that you would have within your own process where the use of a verification system would be problematic, please reach out to Scott and I so that we can have a further conversation and maybe include that in our Treasury check. So with that, Scott, I'm going to turn it over to the next page or the next slide here. And here we have 2 items, actually 3 items to make you aware of. As Scott mentioned, we like to include links to updated manuals when they are released, because we want to make sure that you're always working with the most current manual. And so the FDIC has issued an update to its RMS manual as it relates to other real estate. There was an accounting change, which had an impact of how that was outlined in section 3.6 of the manual. So it's now been incorporated appropriately. And then OCC has had 2 updates, one to their bank control booklet and one to their branch closing booklet. And those changes were mostly administrative in nature, that they were making some typographical and editorial changes that aren't really substantive, but just to make sure that, again, you're working with the most current version of those manuals. And a link to all of those are included in our resources here for you. So with that, Scott, I'm going to turn it back over to you, please.
Great. Thanks, Heather. So on this next slide here, I want to talk about a digital romance awareness campaign. So the Department of Homeland Security Investigations launched this awareness campaign. They actually launched this this year on Valentine's Day. So appropriate. And it's designed to educate the public on the dangers that are associated with online romance scams. And, not just that, but looking at what we see with these, obviously, what is some of the harm, how to protect yourself and loved ones. So it's very much consumer facing. Now, Heather and I know that you all deal with this on a regular basis. You're on the front lines of dealing with not only romance scams, but all sorts of fraud, be it elder financial abuse or other schemes as well. So this data that we have on the slide for you, and everything that Homeland Security is gathering here to show just how significant it is, might not come as a surprise to you. But on the slide, the second bullet point here, we can see that that's 304 million was lost just in 2020 alone, which was then 9 times higher than 5 years prior. And we continue to see these numbers go up, right? And again, you all know that these numbers are going up, that fraud is on the rise. It has been, continues to be. This is a hot topic for sure. So this campaign is certainly worth taking a look at, right? We can use all the tools and resources we can get. This is just one additional tool, one additional resource, one way that we can use to help combat this. So some of these topics on how to spot it, common schemes, various trends, it's all about looking at that and seeing, wait a minute, with your customers, right? When they look at this and they say, wait a minute, this is exactly what's happening to me. We know that prevention is always the best tool, right? So anything that we can use to educate customers, to raise awareness, to help them spot or recognize, or again, explain to them when you recognize it, because we know we get the calls from you that you say, Scott and Heather, we know that this is a scam. We know that this is a romance scam. We've seen this before. We recognize it. How do we get our customers to recognize it? How do we get them to know, to spot it? So when we're working with them, that they're able to recognize and not go through with this or stop it in its tracks before it happens. Well, this is, again, another one of those tools that you can use. You can use it to help train your staff, to help show them so that they can spot. You can use it to refer your customers to provide additional resources for them, be it consumer-facing resources, just part of whatever financial literacy programs that you're working on through your website or campaigns of your own. But again, something that you can directly use to refer your customers to when you spot these. Then there's also contact information, right? So it's helpful to be able to say, it's not just me that's seeing it, go out and look what Homeland Security is seeing. We can call them, we can report. That tip line that, again, you can use on your own as well to be able to track and monitor and report when you see it. But we have those calling options. We have those filing options online. So again, we're always on the lookout for additional resources and tools. Here's another one here for you. This is specific to those romance schemes. And yes, it was a campaign that was launched on Valentine's Day, but it's still very much worth taking a look at there. Then additionally, as we move on to our next slide to a separate topic, this is more of a routine one. The Fed has released its most recent issue of the Consumer Compliance Outlook publication. So this is, of course, the Fed's regular publication, goes out through email, is on their website as well, focused on consumer compliance issue. This edition's feature article discusses special purpose credit programs, specifically in the light of fair lending and ECOA. The Fed is looking at, renewed interests in these that they're seeing and kind of just looking to address it from a fair lending perspective. So there's a discussion on requirements for establishing SPCPs, including treatment and requirements under ECOA, essentially what would be authorized if you're looking to set up one of these programs. There's also then examples of SPCPs and what some financial institutions have specifically done, taking a look at those specific programs that have been launched and successfully implemented. There's a review of the GSEs, so Fannie and Freddie's plans to develop and implement such programs themselves, including purchasing loans from lenders that are issued under an SPCP. And then there's also an update on the CRA and SPCPs under the new 2022 CRA rules. So there's a very good and comprehensive discussion within there. Again, not just from the light of fair lending and ECOA, but how to implement and how to create within those parameters. Then there's also a very nice one-page summary on the program requirements. So if you just want that snapshot of it as well, or some takeaway back from there, then that one-pager is a really nice look at it. Additionally, so that's the feature article in the Outlook, but there's more to it. There's a list of FRB consumer affair letters, all of them from 2021 through to 2022. These are, of course, letters related to FRB's policy and procedure addressing various consumer compliance topics. For example, there's the revised exam procedures, interagency letters that are in there as well. So again, just a summary of what we've had over the last couple of years. There's also regulatory updates from Washington. So there's various compliance issues that are just examined and summarized and presented here as topics, such as Reg II, CFPB's circular on consumer credit report disputes, crypto activities, some that we've already seen, but all of those, among others, are gathered within a section within the update. And then it wraps up with federal court opinions and a regulatory calendar. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather for our final topic and to wrap up our presentation for the day.
Super. Thank you, Scott. There are some items that the CFPB has recently issued that we wanted to make sure is on your radar. One would be a helpful resource for you if you're looking for a reference chart as it relates to HMDA. Maybe you're trying to train a new person or just wanting to make sure that your own reference materials are up to date. The CFPB has, in fact, issued a reference chart relating to HMDA data. Now, a caveat to that, it does not have data fields or additional details as it relates to preparing your LAR. But it does have a helpful reference chart, one stop kind of a place for you about HMDA just in general. There also then was an advisory opinion recently published in the Federal Register issued by the CFPB and their interpretation of a RESPA component. Many of you have been in the industry for a long time. We know about RESPA Section 8 kickbacks, and the regulators are always trying to make sure that we are not providing something of value for free or getting something for value that we're not paying for. And this particular topic, they're looking at the mortgage comparison platforms that are basically the internet shops that provide rate information and are trying to steer customers, maybe based only upon rate, to particular mortgage providers. And while we're not directly in that business, our banks might use some of those businesses, but we're not the actual marketers ourselves. The takeaway of that opinion, I think, is helpful to make sure that when you are engaged in advertisement, you want to make sure, and it's related to real estate mortgage, something subject to RESPA, settlement service provider, you do want to make sure that you're paying for what it is that you're getting the service of, to make sure that you're not falling into the Section 8 anti-kickback provision. So just a helpful reminder, but it's a new look at a service out there, and just make sure that you're not inadvertently trapping yourself into a violation there. And then we wanted to make sure that you were aware of a report that was issued by the CFPB as it relates to data that's being reflected in consumer credit reports, that the CFPB looked back at several years worth of data about what is being reported as lines of activity or lines of credit or just general information on a consumer report, and have found that some of the medical related information has been, I guess you want to say, cleaned up a little bit, where they are seeing that there is not as much medical information being reported by hospitals and doctors' offices and in the health industry in general onto consumer reports. So for those of you who use consumer reports and are seeing a trend there of, wow, information is really changing, that's, I think, a valid observation that there has been a focus by the CFPB on making sure that information being reported to consumer reporting agencies is accurate. And we're finally seeing some of that outcome, I think. But it's helpful to know what, in fact, is the trend on the consumer reporting agency. So we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, more so than anything you'd have to re-implement in your own shop. So that's kind of our nutshell of what we found important to us in compliance here this February. But certainly want to make sure that you are aware of all the materials that we have made available to you this year through our WBA website. So we certainly have taken time each month to update not only these videos, but also new materials on the WBA Compliance tool page. So make sure that you're familiar with those resources. Scott's always updating those with brand new materials. Our newest one is the flood insurance toolkit, as well as the transfer by affidavit guide. So two brand new things that we do think will bring a great help to you and your staff. And also then always our compliance hotline. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us to either ask a specific question for something that's maybe new to you, or you're wanting confirmation of something. We're always happy to help talk through a topic or provide you a citation of where you can find it, because we know that you all handle so much every single day. So with that, Scott, I do believe we've come to a conclusion of another compliance corner. And on behalf of Scott and I, we certainly look forward to next month. So we'll see you all then.
See you, everyone.